The enemy doesn't play fair. And so when he says he's roaring like a lion, the lion doesn't just look at the herd, I'm going to take on the strongest because that would be fair. He takes on the weak one because he doesn't play fair. And the enemy doesn't play fair because the enemy looks to kill and destroy humans that are made in the likeness of their creator. When we talk about these things and not isolating and being around other Christians, it's not just, looking to build our church. No, these are biblical things that will help you grow as a Christian in your walk with Christ. And we need accountability.
Hey, welcome to the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. Thank you so much for joining us. However you're listening to us, however you're watching us, we just really appreciate you coming along for the journey and partnering with us in discovering new things about ourselves and new things about our walk with Christ. And today we're talking about community, the importance of your church community and how community is critical. And Tim, we always start the podcast episodes with catching up and things like that and what's new in your life. But I've noticed that this episode fits really well with what you've been up to. So why don't you bring everybody in on this last week, what you've been doing, what your church has been celebrating, and also how you're the undisputed cornhole champion.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So I don't have to bring it up. We were at a family camping trip, and we haven't recorded for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And, we keep our episodes unhindered for you. So you have weekly episodes, but there are weeks when we don't talk for a little bit. And so It's good to catch up again and come back from, a family camping trip. We've personally done it as a family for maybe 5 years now, and the church has done it for over 7. But there's I think there was 120 people that went, which is a lot. And we had this whole loop, of camping sites. Some were RVs, some were tents. And I think at least half of those people were kids, because it's just like, okay, kids, here's a loop and just run around and we'll see you at dinner or see you at the next event. And parents love that because I can just stay in the forest and read, and then my kids can run around like crazies. So it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy it. Getting there is not super fun, especially this year. We had some road closures, which led to an already long 4-hour trip up to about 6.5 hours. So that was not great, but at least everyone got there safely, and had a bunch of new people this year too, which really helps. If you're with some people for 3 nights, you get to know them really well, as opposed to just seeing them on Sunday. And so it's great for community, great for, that we had devotionals at night. We had Sunday morning, we had an actual worship service with worship and a sermon, and our cornhole tournament, which was awesome. So me and Joe, we were on a team, and last year we got to, I think we were 3rd place, and the year before that we were pretty close, but this is the first year we were able to seal the deal, get the championship. Nice. And there's a clip online. It's intense. You saw that too. Like, everyone's cheering, everyone's like, it's a big event, and it's a lot of fun. We have a trophy as well. We can get our names on at church for some bragging rights. And so just an overall fun time of getting away. The best part about it is that you literally have no cell phone service at all. You are just dead to the world. And so you're really able to get away, be with people, be with, God and his creation. And, if you go hiking or if you go to other places and you still have your phone, it's kind of hard to even then, completely disentangle from that. But up here you were completely unplugged. And it's funny when you drive back, when you hit cell phone service, your cell phone's just like, bam, here's 1,000 things that, you've missed out on in the last 3 days. And it was funny because we actually went to a hiking spot, and there's this little chunk of road where you do get cell phone service. And as we're driving, I noticed that, okay, I'm getting all these, I have like 20 emails saying our alarm's going off at the house. So I'm like, oh no, that's not good. We had someone watching the house, and so I had to like drive further down, drop my family off, drive further down to get more service, and then figure out what was happening with the alarm. Everything was fine, but just had a false alarm that was kept ringing for a while, and probably hurt our cat's ears because they were still running around in the house. But so yeah, and then we had a hike, and it was a mosquito-filled hike that we started on, and before you know it, we're like just covered, and the bug spray is not working, so we had to all come back quicker than we thought. Wow. So fun stuff like that happens too, but it's all in the guise of, church community, doing stuff together. Yeah. Anyone can go camping with just you and your family, which is great, but also, there are events that churches have that allow you to be a part of community, whether it's small groups, whether it's potlucks or picnics, or events for the kids. We have VBS this summer for most churches. There's a lot of community things. There's things that both affect your church And then there's things that are more for the community, like more focused on non-church people to get them
Right.
in to see kind of what they're missing. Or, I see posts a lot online of like, Facebook posts and communities like, hey, we're new here. We have no friends. Like, what do we do? There's a lot of people that won't even admit it publicly, but they are isolated. They
Right.
don't have friends. Like it's hard to just make new friends as an adult without something like church or sports or some kind of community thing to help you get connected. I can just imagine what it's like. You're in your 30s, you have a family, you're working 50, 60 hours a week, and you have minimal hobbies, or you have, no free time. Like, how do you get connected with other people? Because we all need it. We're made for fellowship, we're made for community. And we believe as pastors that church is the answer to that. Is biblical, but also regardless of church or not, community and being around other people is essential as the human race. It's what we're
Yeah.
made for. And we believe the best outlet is church. And so, Drew, what about for you? What kind of things do you look forward to as far as community events or things your church does or has done that kind of, brings people together apart from Sunday?
Yeah, you nailed most of it. I mean, we've talked about it. It's important for the definition of community and the goal of community to be clearly defined, right? Because if we're not careful, we'll just say like, "Hey, we're doing community," and that's kind of like discipleship, and it's like, well, it just needs to be a clear goal of like what we're really trying to accomplish. So first of all, I love that your church is very like clear that, hey, we're all going to go to a place together for a defined amount of time. The goal is that we would all live life together for those few days, and I think that's really important. So I've seen things like that before. Outreach events, anytime you're serving with someone, you really get to know them well, and that's community. That you're serving together. That's not necessarily like a discipleship kind of atmosphere. Maybe could turn into that over time, but when you're serving the community together, when you're partnering with other local ministries and you're going out in your spare time Monday through Saturday and you're willing to sweat a little bit or you're willing to give a little bit of your time or your money, that's a great opportunity to get to know people. And then like just hanging out, just making it a priority. And this is really tough for people who are introverted. I'm a very extroverted person, but at the same time, like I have my routine.
Yeah.
And even though I'm extroverted, like there's a certain time I go to the gym, there's a certain time I need to be home, when especially with having a 6-year-old and now almost a 4-year-old. And there are certain things that I want to accomplish, I want to get done, and I want to do for me. And that kind of sets parameters around the day. And then you're trying to hang out with other people who are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So you have to really be like intentional, and you have to recognize like all the things you just said about how important community is, not just from a biblical stance, but even just for your mental health, being around other people. Like that is a necessity. And so you have to make it a priority. And that means sometimes you're going to have to give, sometimes other people are going to have to give, and you're going to have to figure out times when you can really make it happen. So for me personally, like I said, with having 2 kids, usually the best way to do community is like, hey, have y'all eaten yet? Because we're going to eat. Or what are y'all doing tonight? Because we're grilling out. Why don't y'all come over? Otherwise, like you're talking about trying to get your kids into a place for an extended period of time. There's going to be meltdowns. There's going to be late bedtimes. That makes the next day difficult.
Yeah.
And when you're balancing that with work days, it's really difficult. So to me, like one of the best things you can do is just ask somebody like, are you hungry? Do you want to go eat? Let's sit down. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. And I think that's really important, especially for everyone listening that has a team and is trying to lead and trying to connect. You can't just have meetings with people, and you can't just bring everybody into a room and because you're their boss, like somehow that's going to create community. No, that creates work.
Yeah. Right. I
So
know.
what you want to do is have like one-on-one time. You want to spend one-on-one time with people, and you want to learn how to value what they value.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you really show care. That's when you really can be in community with somebody. And it's at that point that usually you'll have, the best people around you to get stuff done and move together. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's messy. There's no one right answer for this. It
Right.
takes work. It takes putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. When and I'm more introverted by nature. And so for me, I want to be home alone at night if I have the choice. I don't want to be in group settings if I have the choice. But then I push myself past it. And as a pastor now on Sunday morning, like I'm out there talking to people, I'm putting myself out there. I see the value of it. I talk to people that say, oh my gosh, I've been isolated this past year and I've gone through depression. I've gone through all these problems. I need to be back into community. I talked to one person. He's like, I'm going to be at church every week from now on, and then haven't seen him again. Right. And so we can recognize with our mind that this is something we need, but actually putting yourself out there and doing it is another thing. That's where the enemy comes in. It loves to get you when you're isolated. And we see a biblical model for this. We see the early church in Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves to fellowship and to doing life together. Everything that they had was spread out for the welfare of those around them and for the poor and the widows. They devoted themselves to breaking bread together, it says. And, Hebrews 10:24 is a famous verse, especially during COVID. Don't forsake the gathering. It's easy to see how quickly we did that, and in hindsight, we would have done things a little differently, but we didn't know at the time, I think. And so I think if we were faced with something like that again, it's going to be a really gut check of saying, okay, we can't forsake the gathering. We have to make sure that we do this despite whatever government. I mean, just look at like the persecuted church in China, right? They still meet. They meet in homes and they meet in, ways that are not public all the time, but they don't forsake the gathering, even in the face of persecution. And I think the early church especially faced persecution just tremendously. And that's how the church grew, is because you had people passionate about Jesus, passionate about each other. And through that spread to people that were hurting and broken to see that, hey, there's something crazy going on here that's not normal. And then 1 Corinthians 12:12 reminds us that we are all parts of the body of Christ. Each one of us has a different role and we're all connected together within the community. And so oftentimes it's just, the church serves me. I get what I need from the church, and not thinking of it that I have something to give the church. You listening have something to give the church, because God gives us all with gifts and abilities through his Holy Spirit. And so you have something to offer, whether you believe it or not. That's why you need to be in community, because someone else needs what you have, and someone else needs to be encouraged by you. Someone else needs for you to come alongside them and just, help with what, I mean, we have something called Life Care, where we go out in the community and just pull weeds for people that are going through hardships. And, I go out there with my kids once in a while, and, some of the church members that I'm talking to, I get to know them. And also the people that we're helping get to see, hey, this church is more than just come on Sunday. Like, they're actually helping me with my weeds right now. It's crazy. And just the testimonies from that, by putting yourself out there in situations that are not comfortable, whether you think you have this amazing gift for prophecy or teaching or whatever, it doesn't matter, but you have the ability to pull a weed. You have the ability to do something, to give someone a ride to the airport. Like, those are something that God's equipped you to be available and to help. And sure, there's seasons of life when you're going through medical things, you can't make it out, or you might be confined to the home. We're not talking about that. We're talking about if you have the ability to help somebody, you should. And that's what it means to be the body of Christ, both with your spiritual giftings and with the physical giftedness that God's given you.
Yeah, you're right on. And there's so many excuses for doing things like you just mentioned and being part of the community. And we will even leverage our Christianese in those excuses and be like, well, I just, I don't know that I'm called to that, or, I would be involved in that, but, I don't know that I'll have to pray about it. I don't really know that God's led me in that direction. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, just everything you said, like in Acts, when we read about the church and the way that they're structured, nobody was sitting around going, am I really called to that? They were like, hey, what are we doing? We're going to pick weeds? Yeah, no, like sign me up. I'm in. Whose car are we taking? Right? Like, this is what we should be asking. Not if we're called to something, but whose car are we going to take? So I think that's where we've got to grow up a little bit and just be willing to step in and be uncomfortable, be uncomfortable. Nobody's asking you to go hang out with somebody and immediately share all of your life experiences, nor is anyone else trying to do that with you. It's just like the only thing you really have to do is force yourself to be present. The rest will kind of take care of itself. And if you're present enough, then you'll find yourself being in community in a really natural way, I believe.
Yeah. And a part of being in church community for ourselves as Christians is that we get the benefit of growth, both for ourselves and helping other people grow, because no matter where you are in your Christian walk, there's always someone ahead of you. There's always someone behind you that you can help. Proverbs 27, famous verse, is iron sharpens iron. So one person sharpens another. That's why we need to be in community. Also, Galatians 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So there's a lot of burdens out there. We were just talking before we hit record of a lot of pain, a lot of people that are going through
So much.
things.
Yeah.
Even Plato is not a Christian. He says, be kind because everyone is fighting a battle. So everyone's going through stuff. You're either in battle, you're coming out of battle, or you're soon to be in a battle. That's just life. Whether it's finances or health or job situations, we need to be kind. We need to love others. But also, as we go through burdens, we need to rely on other people. We have an active prayer channel of over 70 people at our church that are on the prayer team or are willing to help pray for people that we constantly put prayer requests in because, that's what we're called to do. We're called to pray for one another. That's where we can say like, all right, this person's in the hospital. Who can visit them? It's an active place for that. And your church should have some sort of prayer ministry because prayer is how we fight back. It is a spiritual thing, but it's also something that there's a spiritual side to this, a physical side to this, when we lift each other's burdens. And I think too, when we talk about, hey, I'm going through this, we have to be vulnerable enough to admit it. We have to be vulnerable enough to ask for help.
Yeah.
I even fall into this too. As a pastor, I can't say that I need prayer right now. And that's just a lie. That's just a lie.
I get it, dude. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't be, whatever week is, I can't be like, I'm going to let the other people have the prayers and not me because I'm somehow like, it's just, if you're in ministry or if you're in a leader, you might feel the same way. And that's just a lie. Like we should be able to ask for prayer. We should be able to allow people to come alongside us. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength when you are vulnerable enough to allow people to come alongside you. And another benefit of community is a sense of belonging, finding identity and diversity in a body of Christ. There's Romans 12:4 talks about unity. And 1 Peter 4:10 talks about using our gifts to serve others as faithful stewards. And so the Bible's full of opportunities. And we talked about an early church. Paul's writing to many of these churches with like, hey, this is the structure. This is the leadership. Even the early disciples are like, we need to establish deacons who can handle the felt needs of the community so we can focus on teaching. Like that was an early decision. Like, hey, this is something that we need to have some structure. We need to have a plan here because the needs are so great. And we see churches today that have a lot of various different structures, but the goal is still hopefully to help the community to grow in our knowledge of Christ, to serve each other, and to carry others' burdens as part of community.
Yeah, and when you're carrying the burdens of others, you're protecting each other from being in isolation.
Right.
And that's so vital. You mentioned when we went through COVID earlier, that was the struggle. We were sitting here going, hey, we're not going to meet on Sunday mornings. How do we keep the church rolling? How do we do this online? How do we do this, virtually even? What does that look like? And at the same time, we were seeing suicide rates go up nationally.
Yeah.
We were seeing depression go up nationally. We were seeing adultery go up nationally. Like all these negative things. And why is that? Well, because everybody was bored out of their daggum minds.
Right.
Everybody was going to other outlets and some of those were destructive. And then as the church, we have to go, all right, well, what's really our role, whether it's a COVID season or not? And it's like, well, we've got to protect the flock. We got to protect the congregation, just like you mentioned in the church in Acts. It's like, oh, we got to watch out for the homeless. We got to watch out for the widows. We got to watch out for the needy. Like, we got to watch out for these people. Why? Because if we don't, no one else is going to. They're going to be isolated and they're going to be picked off. They're going to be weak and it's not going to work out well for them because that's when the enemy attacks, right? And so for us as a church, it's important to recognize, hey, who in our congregation right now might be somebody who's isolated? And this is something that I try to do even weekly. I recognize, hey, here's an age group right now in our church that's probably a little isolated. They lead in certain ministries, but the people they're leading are much younger than them or much older than them. Or, hey, here's a guy or here's a couple that's in a new section of either their life or marriage or a journey that they're in. And you're recognizing I wonder who's like they're reaching out to, who's reaching out to them. And if the answer is like not easy to come by, then you probably need to reach out to them and just see how they're doing with that, and
Yeah.
let them know that you're going to be willing to partner with them in it, spend some time in prayer in it. And that changes every week, but it's important to assess, because the worst thing you can do for your congregation, whether you're the pastor or whether you just attend, is just assume that everyone's fine.
Yeah.
And that's just not gonna work out well. What one thing we were talking about, just how vulnerable you are when you're alone. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." Well, if you think
Yeah.
about how lions hunt, what do they devour? What do they go after? So if there's a herd of wildebeest, do they pick the strongest, most physical wildebeest and go after? No, they find the one that's off on their own, that's weak and scraggly.
That's right.
They find the little child that's been left behind. They find the one that hasn't been fed in a little while and can't really keep up with the herd. Like, that's how the lion attacks. And so we can't allow
Yeah.
separation to happen there. That's our job. That's our role as a church. And that, we've got to remember, that is our role as a church before everything we do on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when we think church, and I know our listeners are like me, when we think church, we immediately go Sunday morning worship and preaching.
Right.
And I'm just telling you, like, before that, we have to think church, nobody gets left behind.
Mm-hmm.
Church, doing life with one another. Church, praying bold prayers. Then you want to get to the level of preaching and worship, sure, have at it. But that doesn't need to be the first thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good, because when you think about my growth as a Christian, and whether you're still on, the Bible says, milk or solid meat, the enemy doesn't play fair. And so when he says he's roaring like a lion, the lion doesn't just look at the herd. I'm going to take on the strongest person because that would be fair. I'm a strong lion. I'm going to take on the strong wildebeest. No, he takes on the weak one because he doesn't play fair, and the enemy doesn't play fair. And so you see him torment young kids. You see, even if it's through trauma, there's no cause of their own, he'll use that to get a stronghold in their life, because the enemy looks to kill and destroy humans that are made in the likeness of their creator. And so the enemy will lie to you. He'll do all these things that are not, quote, fair, because he looks to kill you. And so when we talk about these things and not isolating and being around other Christians, it's not just, looking to build our church. No, these are biblical things that will help you grow as a Christian in your walk with Christ. And we need accountability. I mean, we need people in our life that can tell us, hey, you're a little off here. You said this, you shouldn't have. A lot of times that's our spouse. A lot of times it's other people in our life. But accountability is for the church and for church leaders. And I heard a great quote, something to the effect of, if your pastor can't give you correction, he's not your pastor, he's just a teacher. And I've seen that so many times, I'm sure you have, is where, okay, I love you, I love your teachings, but if you start to tell me what I'm doing wrong in my life, then I'm out. And I'll find someone who either doesn't know me well, or I'll find a big enough church to blend in so that they don't actually bring up this sin that I should be getting rid of.
Well, and so I want to butt in a little bit here, because this is something that I've experienced multiple times just this week. And I will say, I'm really proud of the people I've had conversations with this week and how they kind of leaned into it. Wanted to get better. I really love that. And both of them, in their 20s and willing, ready.
Yeah.
I love that. Let's remember as leaders that having a conversation that breeds accountability, it doesn't mean that it has to be a bad conversation.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that you can't encourage. It doesn't mean that you can't be empathetic. One of the things I'm really learning, if we were to go into hey, what's God teaching Drew right now, is learning that empathy and authority can go hand in hand. Sometimes I think I get twisted in thinking, do I need to be empathetic in this conversation, or do I need to be more authoritative in this conversation? It's can you just figure out a way to do both? Maybe that would be best. You
Yeah.
know, maybe instead of siding with all empathy or, siding with all authority and just kind of being a little intense, what if you did both? And so when we have conversations about accountability, it doesn't have to be, hey, listen, I've noticed this. You're really sucking at this. You're really missing it here. Do better. Like, it doesn't have to
Right.
be that kind of conversation. How
Yeah.
about we start with, hey, I get it and I understand. And I've had moments in my life where if somebody didn't come talk to me, I wouldn't be where I'm at. And I
Yeah.
was having destructive situations and destructive habits. And if someone didn't sit me down, I wouldn't be where I am. Or no one ever did sit me down, and I had to deal with that well later than I should have. I had to deal with that
Sure.
once I got married, or I had to deal with that once I got a job. So I'm saying all that because I see something you're doing that I feel like I've learned from, and I want you to be better than me.
Yeah.
And so start there with a level of like, this doesn't have to be a bad conversation. This can be really healthy. This can be really good. But what that would mean, leader, what that would mean is that you'd have to put the effort in. You'd have to put the prayer in. You'd have to put the thought in
Yeah.
before you have the conversation. And that takes effort, and that takes time, and that takes relationship. And so I think we just got to be better at having those conversations.
Here's the difference. I think if you're a ministry leader or pastor and you talk to someone about something they need to be accountable for, if you do it with the motivation that they're making you and your church look bad, you're wrong. Because it's not about you and your church. It's about them and their relationship with Jesus and what's best for them. And so if you come at the angle of, hey, I love you. I love that you're passionate about Jesus. This right here, this is going to hurt you long term. This is, you may not see it, but I'm just telling you because I love you that this should change. And here's some Bible verses, and here's how I'll walk alongside with you. Like, don't you think that's the difference?
Yeah, that's a big difference. And I think that's the difference in healthy and unhealthy for sure.
Yeah.
And
Because if I have this
do it-
couple sleeping around in my church, like, oh, people are going to see that, then I'm going to get the heat as the pastor. And now it's all about me, 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 instead of like, okay, what's actually happening spiritually to this young couple that may not know any better? Like, how can I come alongside them?
Yeah, and with social media, that's inevitable. There's going to be somebody that posts something that you're like, did they really just share that quote from Trump? Did they really just share that quote from Biden? Did they really just change their profile picture to that? Like, like there's going to be moments like that. But if you're, like you said, if your first reaction is, what is that going to do to the church? It's like, hey, how about you figure out how to have a conversation with them one-on-one and go, look, everybody's in process and you can do whatever you want. I'm just helping you understand the perception.
Yeah.
And I'm helping you understand that in the big scheme of things, it's probably just not worth it. And I have to learn this. Like, these are things that we all still go through. I mean, I posted something on Facebook a year and a half ago that was incredibly insensitive. I didn't know it was insensitive at the time. I actually thought it was pretty funny. And I posted it. And I immediately got a text from a really good friend of mine that was like, hey, just so you know, like, that makes you look like a really insensitive jerk. And I was like, it does? I thought it was funny. Why? And then he was like, because of this. And I was like, oh, okay. And I took it down. Like, we're all in process. We're all trying to figure it out. But you got to have somebody that's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, I'm still in the fight for you. I still have your back. But this is something you might want to think about.
Yeah. Bro, you shouldn't have shared that Jesus was a convicted felon too, and I still follow him. Like, please don't share that. My goodness, I hate that. You cannot compare Jesus to Trump. Okay, that's my soapbox.
Yep,
Oh my gosh.
Yep, that's the one that's the one. That's the one that everybody's going with. Jesus was a convicted felon too, and it's like, can we not do this?
Oh gosh, it's so cringe. Okay. But, as we talk about the church, there's all these comments I see online is that I don't need church. It's just me and God. Like, we're cool. If anything changes, the Holy Spirit's my teacher, right?
Sure.
I don't need,
They've
got it all figured out.
Yep.
Right. And a lot of that comes from church hurt. It comes from, seeing things in the church that, you look at the Catholic Church, you look at the fallen preachers in the evangelical church. I mean, there's no shortage of examples to look at of problems in the church. And so there are challenges to this. There is, you put 100+ people together in a room with different personalities, different giftings, different experiences, different traumas. and you expect that to work magically, it's not going to happen. So you have
Right.
to fight for unity. And I think that's what Jesus's message is at the end of John, in John 15, 16, 17. He's telling his disciples, above all things, be one as the Father and I in heaven are one.
Yeah.
And so that takes fighting for it. It doesn't take that, oh, I tried it. It's not, I'm not needed. I'm going to go do my own thing. Drew and I have episodes on how to join a church, how to pick a
Yep.
church, when to leave a church. Like we really understand the importance of picking the right church, but also there are times you do need to leave the congregation that you are in. And so we're not going to talk about all those reasons again. Go listen to those episodes, but
Sure.
we will recognize, yes, there is church hurt. There is problems in leadership. There is structures that American church has made that are not necessarily biblical or even healthy. Absolutely. But still, the Bible is our foundation, not the church down the street, not the mega church. We don't look to them for guidance. We plant ourselves somewhere until God pulls us out or until something happens that we need to go somewhere else, and to be prayerful about it, not just to use our own wisdom and emotions. I mean, emotions are the main thing that will get you in trouble here, is
Right.
that, we get the comments that, I didn't feel welcome at your church. It's like, okay, can you give me some more specifics? Because if it's just that you didn't feel welcomed, that's your emotion, that's what you're feeling, and maybe we did something wrong and tell us, but I know our hospitality team, like you're getting welcomed at least 3, 4 times before you enter the
Right.
sanctuary, right? Like, what are your expectations for why you didn't feel, again, feelings,
Right.
why didn't you feel welcome? What are you expecting from a church? Like, seriously. What are you expecting when you walk in? You expecting here's $100? Like, go, like, I don't know.
Totally.
But when we live off of our feelings in American church, it's all about me and me and me, the Trinity of me, 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 instead of about community.
Yeah, you're right on the money with what are people experiencing on the way in, but like with guest experience and how many times they're being welcome and, oh, I didn't feel this way. It's like, well, what was your posture coming in? What was
Yeah.
your preparation coming in? And like you said, it's vital. It's so important. So we've got to be ready on a Sunday morning. And this is for, if there's people listening right now that are like, well, I'm already part of a church. Well, then you need to be ready on a Sunday morning to meet new people and invite them in on what God is currently doing in and through you
Yeah.
and your church. But if you're on the other side and you're visiting churches, maybe just be like normal. Maybe just have like normal expectations. Maybe recognize that we're all living life for the first time too, and we're trying to figure out how to do church and how to do life together. Maybe be open to community and recognize like what that needs to be. And look, if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you have to look for it, right? And that's my biggest thing is like you're going to find whatever you're looking for. And so, I've had people walk into our church that are not looking for like a contemporary church, although what does that even mean anymore? Right? Because if you say something like, I'm looking for a contemporary church, that means you're living in the early 2000s, and you're looking for like, I'm not looking for Hillsong worship. It's like, no offense, dude, but everybody's doing this now. Like
Yeah.
everyone's contemporary, which means that they're traditional. This is the new tradition. And so when you come in and you see a little bit of light, or you see a stage, or you see a keyboard, or you see a drum set, and you're immediately like, oh, this is contemporary. It's like maybe your expectations are a little off. So yeah, the posture coming in is important. Being open to community is just as important as someone wanting to share community with you.
Yeah. And I think for those listening, regardless of what level you're at in your walk with Christ and your level of community involvement, just be in prayer about what God has for you and put yourself in positions that are uncomfortable, because I know
Yeah.
that by doing that, you're going to be stretched, you're going to be grown. God's going to use those situations to help you, even if it's, conflict with another church member. Like if you can help either mitigate that for someone else, or if you can help not spread gossip, like This is a huge thing. The gossip that's hidden as a prayer request, or the people that like, I'm not really gossiping, I'm just telling two people, and those two people tell two people, and before you know it, you have church hurt because the church is gossiping about you. And we have to be better than that. We have to make sure that we're loving first, that we're trying to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And you might, church shopping is not fun, and so you might have to go through a few churches to find the right one. But it's not just, again, like which one feels right or which one meets all the check marks of what you want in a church. Where is God truly calling you? That's going to be the question, because he might call you to a church that has a lot of problems so that you can be a light there, so that you can be part of the solution. And that might be that you need to be uncomfortable for a while. Or if you're in a stable church, if you already are serving or involved, small groups are very important, life groups, whatever you want to call them, of doing life with people throughout the week. If you're just checking a box of 1 hour a week on Sunday, there is more. And I'll just leave it at that. There is more than just Sunday morning. Sunday's very important, but a part of community, it is so hard to do community on Sunday because things are so fast. Things are moving so fast. People are coming and going. You can say, hi, brother, how are you? I'm highly blessed and favored. And then you move on. That's not community. That's just a shell of what the church is called to. And so maybe God's calling you to reach out to some people. Maybe God's calling you to check into that group. I mean, I know as an introvert, approaching someone's house for a small group when there's 6 people there who know each other very well and asking to be a part of it, that's intimidating. That's tough. But how else are you going to be a part of that group unless you have that awkward first interaction, that first meeting, and then the rest won't be as awkward after that. So anyway, my encouragement to those listening is that we hope you see the value in community. We hope that you push yourself to do more, and not just to build ourselves up in our churches, but to go out there to those that are hurting, that don't know Jesus, that don't have the answer to life. I mean, our sermon this past Sunday was, our pastor said that imagine you have $1 million in your pocket, and every time you reach in, there's $1 million. Every single time, no limit. It's not even your money. That's what we have with the gospel. We have this answer that's better than money, that is infinite value that we can give people. And when we hide that, we're actually being disobedient and sinful, because disobedience is sin. I'm not just telling every single person, but God lays it on your heart to do this thing, to talk to this person, to help this person, to give this person $20 and say, God loves you. If you don't do that, then you are being disobedient. And so you will only know if God's calling you to do that if you're intimately involved with relationship with God, when you can hear his voice, and then when you're bold enough to actually obey.
It's great. I hope our listeners take your advice, really reflect on what their involvement needs to be, not just, at their church, but just in their community, in their neighborhood. There's certainly a step to take, right? There's certainly a step to take. I pray that our listeners will be open to taking it. And what I would say, right, is say yes to it, right? That's the way to go. So, Tim, great conversation. Great job planning this out and showing us really how critical it is to be in community. And congrats again. I just got to say, congrats again on the cornhole championship. The video is amazing, and people that haven't seen it, they just don't understand. I would encourage you to post that video on our Eyes on Jesus community Facebook page. I think that would be for sure a blessing to people. It blessed me. I loved it.
Indeed.
Loved cheering you on, man. It was fun.
That's great. All right. Well, until next time, go with God, grow in discernment, and keep your eyes on Jesus.
Thanks for joining us on the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. Don't forget to hit subscribe.